Good morning, everybody. all of you, all of you who might be up at this hour of the day, um, welcome. If you aren't up early enough to catch this program this morning, you certainly can catch it later on because it will be saved. It is 6 o'clock here in the Mountain Time of the United States, January 17th, 2025. And I realize this is an unrealistic time to be up and talking. I could probably pick a much better time than this. But I said I would. I said I would the other day, at least for the rest of this week. I've also decided that I am not going to stream the first hour of Monday and Tuesday's political show. The number of people who join the program after from 8 to 9 is so much higher than those who do the first hour. I don't see any sense in doing the first hour, so I will be saving the best stuff for the second hour of Monday and Tuesday's show. And then as far as appearances later in the week, due to the size of the audience at 6 o'clock my time. I mean, who else is crazy enough to do this besides me and a couple of other of my favorite fans at this hour? But I get up early anyway. I was up this morning at 4 o'clock, taking care of business, preparing some things for this program, so that I can produce or present something to you of something real, something of content. So here, I was watching the news this morning, listening to several podcasts yesterday on X and YouTube, listening to my favorite sources of information, one of which is the Judge Napolitano's podcast, because of the wide variety of guests that I will be having. Not necessarily those guests. I don't think I'm lucky enough to do that, or popular enough to do that, at least not yet. But it's my plan in the future. So while Joe Biden is claiming it was the ongoing work by him and his team that brought this Israeli-Hamas ceasefire agreement together on Wednesday, I guess it's the 15th, it was plainly the effect of President-elect Donald Trump and his efforts to achieve an agreement, in large part, I think, to free him up to pursue other priorities. But Palestinians relieved, if not jubilant, and the Israeli extremists just hotter than a firecracker right now. And the families of hostages, hopeful over regaining the company of their loved ones, have responded to the news in a lot of different ways. And clearly the Biden administration, or whatever that means, whoever the collective Biden is that's running the executive policy, not necessarily, I think more specifically than American foreign policy, the executive policy, could have forced this deal months ago. And they waited, more and more genocide taking place, paying lip service to the Palestinians. But this could have been done last year. I think it was May of last year. They were looking at the deal they're looking at now. But the title of this program is Two American Heroes, and there are two journalists that were present at the last press conference the other day of Blinken, and you can see this if with Judge Napolitano, or I think it's Judging Freedom, at Judging Freedom on YouTube, and you look at the podcast with Max Blumenthal. When a dignitary, a pseudo-dignitary like Blinken, Secretary of the State, has a press conference, he has a press secretary. And it's the press secretary who's going to ask the next questions. It's not that same thing in the White House. The press secretary is deciding who's going to talk. There are some people they will never call on. And they will never call on them, even though they have a press pass to be present. They have every right to be present as a press agent. And they will never call on them because they don't like the questions they're about to hear. So sometimes they have to shout out their question even before the question and answer period begins. So the dignitary gives their speech. Following that, there's a Q&A. And out of respect for the other journalists present, journalists will wait for the Q&A. But if the journalists who have something to say are not going to be called on, then they're going to shout out their questions. And if you watch that video, you're going to see Sam Husseini's serious questions to Blinken. Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to occur? And then on the far side of the room is Max Blumenthal. Such courage, such a hero for him to shout out what he was shouting. He eventually got handcuffed. Now, you know whose names were not mentioned in that news broadcast this morning, even on Fox 13? Not even on Fox 13, because Fox 13 has got to be owned by AIPAC. Now, I know they're very pro-Israel, of course. And they would not mention the name of these journalists. And, in fact, the only thing they showed of Sam Husseini was from behind, where he was yelling, "You're hurting me, you're hurting me, you're hurting me." Now, here's an older fellow, gray-haired, balding on top. Took about 4 or 5 officers to control him and haul him out, arm and leg, as he's shouting out, "Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you," meaning before the International Court of Justice? And how could you allow the Holocaust of our time to have occurred? These are his heroes because they were hauled out and Blumenthal was handcuffed. The younger one of the two was handcuffed. They did not mention their names, and they did not show Blumenthal, and you could not hear the comments that he made in the news this morning. There was a time when I had a lot of respect for Fox News. I don't anymore, of course. It's just sad. And so that, you know, where are we going to go from here? I mean, is Trump, who threatened hell would break out, all hell would break out in the region if a deal was not reached, is he going to have that same kind of success in other parts of the world? You know, will the full scope of development required to defeat the desert sands through water projects over time be governed more by heart than brain to take care of these people? And with the incoming president touting his relationship with the president of China, Xi Jinping, all his sharp comments that he's made about China, what about his choices for key cabinet positions? Doesn't really inspire the confidence I would like to have had that he's going to achieve any kind of meaningful cooperation with the world's largest economy, China, instead of conflict, whether in the military realm or trade or both. In all of these matters, of course, at this point in time, the answer lies with Trump, certainly not with us. So whatever demands do the people, you know, whatever they're going to make of their governments, are they ever going to look at it with the human quotient? Are they ever going to look at these things from the point of view of humanity and what's best for humanity instead of what's best for the oligarchs who rule the ones who are making the decisions? So it's, you know, look at the phenomena of TikTok. And while Biden just said, "I'm not going to make a final decision on the banning of TikTok, I'm going to leave that up to Trump," while they're battling back and forth over free speech and then the business interests of TikTok and the security interests of the Chinese Communist Party and those in America who have their own social media interests that they don't want competing with TikTok. There's a new one called Xiao Hongshu. I think I pronounced that right. It's become the most downloaded mobile app out there right now, and it's from China, and numerous testimonials that the Chinese are trying to show the Americans what life in China is like. Because a lot of Americans still have this idea that in you know, post-World War II and post-Mao Zedong and currently under Xi Jinping, that it's just a horrible place to live. And some of the best statements I've seen in nationally recognized journalists is that over 800 million Chinese, nearly 3 times the population of this country, living standard has been brought up to modern times. Yes, it's a police state, but as I've explained several times on my shows in the past, my son, who is now a nurse practitioner in California, went to China well over 10 years ago. It might be closer to 15 years ago. Nah, well, it doesn't matter. He went to China a long time ago to go teach English. He just didn't see anything here for him. And so he goes to China, a very handsome, very good-looking young man, obviously, and is picked up by Chinese advertisers, because here's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy in northern China walking on the streets, and they think, man, he should be wearing our clothes. So they're huge posters that end up, as he has a contract with Chinese advertising people, to advertise Chinese clothing in a Westerner with blonde hair, blue eyes. And of course that attracts a lot of attention. Now he goes there to teach English to the Chinese children because the Chinese parents do not want their children to only know one language. And of course they're raised with Mandarin in this part of China. And they want them to learn English. We should be as studious, I think, in this country, demanding that our children learn how to speak Mandarin or Russian, one or the other. They're going to need it for the future. Anyway, so he is spending the day teaching English, but at night he goes out on the street and meets with the kids. And within 6 months, and they just flock around him because he's this great personality, celebrity. Within 6 months, he's conversant in Mandarin. And that was brought home to me very sharply 2-3 years ago when he and his wife, Betty, and their daughter, my Chinese granddaughter, Katrina, were visiting here, and we took them to our favorite Chinese restaurant. Water Moon in Draper. And here's this Western boy just rattling off Mandarin with the Chinese staff. That the cooks come out, the sushi chef comes out, the owner comes, well, we're best friends with owners anyway, and they all gather around the table listening to this boy rattling off Mandarin. And I was proud of my son to be able to do that. But it was amazing to me is how surprised the Chinese staff was with my son. Now, I tell you all that to tell you this. When I could have some phone conversations with my son, and they were kind of spread out, but while he was there, I was very concerned with his safety and welfare, because, my gosh, he's in a Chinese or a communist country. I said, do you see the state police? He said, yeah, Dad, they're everywhere. Do they stop you? He said, they stop me all the time until they become familiar with me and they see my paperwork and they know that I'm here teaching English. And I said, well, are there areas where you can't go? He said, no, I just make sure I have my papers with me. And I try to see the countryside, I try to see the city and everything else. And he falls in love with a girl there, and she falls in love with him, and they end up getting married, and that's where my granddaughter came from. And over the years that followed, and he was there for 6-7 years, something like that, before he came back to the States with his wife. And it took 3 years for the American visa to come through that would allow his wife of 3 years. And they had to travel all the way down to Hong Kong. They're in the Jilin, just way, way, way north of North Korea, China. They had to go all the way to Hong Kong to get the paperwork that would allow her to come to the States. She has since become an American citizen. But the point I'm trying to make here is that over the years that followed, there were less and less state police. And another very odd thing happened. People started bringing, they would work all day long for whatever jobs, most of which were backed by the government. But at night, they would start bringing their home project stuff out on the streets, clothing things, gadget type of things, food, different things that they were very good at, out on the street and sell them to one another, which was not allowed except in secret when my son first got there. By the time he left, several years later, it was, like I said, 6 or 7 years before he came back to the States, and has been back over there a number of times for family stuff. He says, you don't see them anymore. You don't see any state police. And he said, the people are happy, and they're out on the streets, and they come and go as they want. I said, are they armed? And he just kind of laughed. They don't have the Second Amendment in China. He kind of laughed. He says, no, but Dad, there's almost no crime. These people take care of themselves. And if there's any belligerence or any kind of violence that begins to erupt, they take care of it themselves before the police ever show up. And he said they respect one another. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not trying to say I'm getting ready to move to China by any means. It's just that in the midst of Trump talking about tariffs against China, and then everybody here getting scared that somehow tariffs here are going to raise the prices of everything that comes from China. The threat of tariffs is just a deal strategy, that's all. He's not going to impose a 20-25% tariff on Chinese goods. That's just to get the Chinese to come to the table and say, all right, a little tit for tat, all right? What do you want? Well, we want this, and we want to eliminate this. We want more of this, but we want you to control more of this over here. Steel, textiles, drugs, strategic minerals, whatever. And you sit there and you bargain back and forth, and maybe there is a little tariff on this until they come around to thinking. And maybe a tariff is lifted over here that already exists. It's just a bargaining tool. And I think it's getting to the point where Americans, Westerners, demand internet access to everything they can possibly get to, that if TikTok's banned, then Xiaohongshu will take its place. And if Xiaohongshu gets banned, something else will take its place, unless they cut off the internet. Then, of course, there's always the conspiratorial stories about that. There's one other thing that I thought that I want to finish with. There's several other things in my notes here. I wanted to talk about Smotrich. Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and how they're threatening to take down the Likud government if the deal goes through. I wanted to spend some time on that. I might wait till Monday, and maybe a little bit tomorrow. But I wanted to finish off with something funny today, and it's Trump has released his list of who is not going to be joining his administration. I don't know, he's got, what, 200 of them so far he's named that'll be a part, and half of them don't even, I think, require Senate approval. But he released a list of those who will not be invited into the administration. So we're talking about John Bolton and the Cheneys and Nikki Haley and Mike Pence. Definitely not getting jobs in the new administration, according to Trump. But I am quoting from Truth Social. This is hilarious. As of today, the incoming Trump administration has hired over 1,000 people, not 200, for the United States government. They are outstanding in every way, and you will see the fruits of their labor over the coming years. But there are some, he said, who need not apply. In order to save time, money, and effort, I'm quoting from Truth Social, it would be helpful if you would not send or recommend to us people who worked with or are endorsed by Americans for No Prosperity, headed by Charles Koch, Dumb as a Rock John Bolton, Bird Brain Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, disloyal warmongers Dick Cheney and his psycho daughter Liz, Mitt Romney, good old Mitt, Paul Ryan, General Mark Milley, James Mattis, Mark Jesper, and any of the other people suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, more commonly known as TDS. I thought that was hilarious. I really think that's funny. Compared to what I started off with, Sam Husseini and Max Blumenthal being hauled out and Max being handcuffed. He was no threat to anybody. He was just in the back yelling the genocide, everything else. Why did you let this go? It could have been stopped a year ago, in other words. Or the treaty could have gone through, the ceasefire could have gone through a year ago, but they've, steamrolled stopping it. So that's it. That should do it for today. I might do something tomorrow. I haven't decided yet, but you'll get if you've signed up for this, and please like and subscribe so we can spread the audience quickly. If this is of any good for you, or you think it might be good for some friends or whatever, like and subscribe, and you can pick this up later in a recorded form. But I'm going to go ahead and end it. I've got things to do, as well as, my goodness, Fridays used to be a spillover day for extra emergencies. Now it's probably the busiest day of the week for me. So I got to get to work. You have a good day. Enjoy the festivities this weekend regarding the inauguration. I will be watching, of course. I'm taking Monday off. I would have taken it off for Martin Luther anyway, because I always take it off for Martin Luther King. But because of the inaugural, it's going to be a double holiday for me. So be safe out there and keep your wits